I just want to welcome everyone to our panel. And first, I want to say hello to Doug, my colleagues, and to Ron Diamond. I'll have a chance to introduce you a little bit more here, but first, just want to kind of do some welcome remarks. But super excited to see you both and to hear from everything we want to share today. There's a lot to get into, so just want to address the audience as well. I'm so glad you're here with us today. We had a ton of registrants and a ton of interest, and we hope that in a very short time, we can address or at least get little nuggets for you to take away today to hope to inspire broader conversations around legacy and what that really means in preparing heirs. So I will share that, I'm the chair of two groups in Austin, and I've loved my role with Tiger 21. It's been one of the best roles I've had in my career so far, and I feel so honored to have the experience and wisdom of my peers, Doug and Ron. They've been so helpful in their mentorship as well. And legacy has been one of the most relevant and powerful conversations that we've seen across Tiger 21 groups. And I know Doug and Ron would agree with that. And it's not really a lot of our Tiger members come really with all, questions about estate planning and the facts and the spreadsheets and asset protection, and which is great. And we need that. And also, it's really important then to have more deeper discussions about what that really means and how to prepare ourselves emotionally for the transfer that ultimately will take place because, longevity only lasts so long. We eventually aren't going to be here. So with that being said, we can look at Doug's and Ron's bios, in online or anywhere within the registration links. They've been doing this for decades with guiding ultra wealthy families in their legacy journey. So I won't spend time on that, but we have a lot to cover. Let's just get right into it, if that's okay. Okay, great. So the first thing I want to get engagement. It's hard for me. I love engagement. That's really a tenet of Tiger 21 is going a little bit deeper into conversations. And so with the webinar, what I'd like to do is get a quick poll of who's in the audience today. And so if we could put up the first couple poll questions, the first one is, I'd like to find out who's in the room today. What best describes your role? Are you a founder, a wealth creator, a spouse or partner, which is also super important? Next gen, which relatively could be under 45. That's under inheriting the wealth and figuring out what to do. An advisor, family office professional, or gosh, you're just curious or interested in what's going on. And then what brought you here today? What could I be helpful with and takeaways for our panel? You want to prepare your heirs better. You're navigating some family conflict. You've got founder syndrome, which we can go into further, or you're just curious about how Tiger 21 members are thinking. And then last, I'm going to ask you to look at kind of test your knowledge here, roughly what percentage of wealth transfers do you believe fail by the third generation? And just take a second there, answer those as quickly as possible. If you don't have access to your screen right now, you can pop it in the chat or anything along this dialogue. Just put your name, your city, so we can properly give a shout out to that. I think we're going to wait a few seconds while they're answering the questions. And maybe while we're waiting for that, Ron, can you start in? I'll set the stage a little bit as well, but we're in the midst of this large wealth transfer, which everyone's heard about, this over 80, whatever number it is now, but 84 trillion expected to change hands by 2045. And yet 90% of heirs say they feel unprepared. What have you seen in the work that you've done in terms of what this translates for your families you work with?
Well, the number today actually is 124 trillion. So
Oh,
there's 124 trillion that's being transferred from the baby boomers to the next gen in the next 20 years. It's the largest transfer of wealth in history. And the statistics show that only 25% of families make it to the second generation, 10 make it to the third, and 5 make it to the fourth. So this is a flawed model, which we need to get right. The industry in general is very fragmented, very siloed, and very inefficient. That's going to change, and I think we're at an inflection point right now.
wow. No, it's I know you run a newsletter, I think you have so much around this topic and you really are a leader in that area. And Doug, when you work really closely with your groups and with your members and have a special, connection and dive pretty deeply, what are you seeing in your work?
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and work with Ron always. With the members, the number one question coming into Tiger 21, one of the top questions is how much money should I give my kids?
Mm,
And we like to reframe that to ask the question, what are you passing on? What is your legacy that you want to pass on beyond the dollar amount? And more importantly, I'll give you the answer that we give in Tiger 21. Any amount is too much for an unprepared heir. And so the conversation really needs to be, what are you doing to prepare your heirs?
I love that. And so here's, all this transferring happening. We're not really talking about what we need to do to prepare. And often it's awkward, right? It's uncomfortable and there's so many things that come out of that. The other thing I want to mention is this sort of entitlement drift. There's this concept, right, that, even like 70% of well-intended errors can move from gratitude to entitlement in a very short time frame, which is surprising to most. And, the data that I saw showed from 3 to 6 months post-inheritance, your errors will move from gratitude to entitlement. Which really kind of trips up like what most people are intended to do. What do you see with that, and why do you think that's happening, Ron?
It's a great question. There's no specific answer for it. My belief is that a lot of it has to come with parenting. And, I remember when we took home, I have two beautiful daughters, Zoe and Bella. I remember when we took them home and we put them, they were in the bassinet, like there's no playbook. Like, okay, these are your kids now. You're supposed to know what to do. So I think that what's really important is gratitude is something, it's a practice that I practice a lot, and I know Doug does as well. Um, it's something you really have to instill in the kids. And if you instill a sense of entitlement, in my opinion, you have not done a good job parenting. And there's no right way to do it. But I think if your kids see you working hard, they're going to work hard. If they see you not working hard, but you say you're working hard, they could see right through that. If they tell you to be healthy, if you tell your kids to be healthy and they don't see you exercise, they're not going to exercise.
Yeah.
They want to see what you're doing. So I think a lot of it is the kids, even at a very, very young age, they learn and pick up a ton from us that we don't even understand.
Yeah.
So we need to lead by example.
Lead by example, 100%. I love that. Doug, do you have anything to add to that particular about entitlement?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It really boils down to expectations and communication. So let's go forward to generation five, generation six, and beyond. And in talking to families who have successfully transferred wealth and created this legacy asset that is enduring, you talk to the family members. And I remember one conversation very clearly. Doug, we always knew about the money. We grew up in the money. And the thing is, we knew what was expected of us and what the money was for. And it's that clear communication about expectations, the communication that, and the thing that struck me was this particular individual and individuals I see who have successfully inherited wealth generationally, they have agency. They can make their own way, they can make their own choices, and they can engage with the wealth or not engage. It's up to them, but they know what's expected of them if they
Yeah.
do engage with the wealth. And that's really powerful.
No, I mean, I love that. Like it's an awkward conversation. I think they say that, right, is communication and trust. And yet it's the thing we're most fearful of. And we spend so much time worrying about all the structural elements and what does the governance look like and who should get much money and what gets divided and what spreadsheets and looks like that. And, kind of wondering what sort of like that means in terms of redefining legacy. So, you know, what beyond financial inheritance, beyond the structures, what is the most important thing to focus on, and what are the common blind spots that families face when they're really trying to prepare for legacy? Ron, what do you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of blind spots. And again, there is no playbook. I think that what I try to do is learn from people who are older than me and smarter than me in everything. And I think that's a really good thing. You find role models. There are children that are really hardworking, really good kids, really well mannered. That's not by accident. That happens for a reason. And I think that parenting, I would argue, I used to run a hedge fund. Running a hedge fund is a lot easier than raising children. It is a very, very hard thing to do. But I just think that they have to see what you do, they watch what you do, and I think if you live by a certain set of principles, in general, they'll do it. And if they don't, it's incumbent upon the parent to basically say, you're not that, you have to be part of society. I'm not just giving you things. And I think it's a very important thing for people to understand. And it comes from the parents, it comes from watching us.
Yeah. Well, and there's just right. And also, defining their own pathway, right? And so at the same time, next gen, you have to also learn that you can't control sort of, your your children. Your children are their own souls and they have their own ideations and their own purpose and values that they want to create in this world. And so, Doug, when you think about sort of founder syndrome, where the wealth creator has a really hard time of letting go. Listen, they've done everything in terms of creating wealth by having control, right? And by putting these measures in place, and then come off sort of an exit, or as they're going through and building a legacy plan, it's really hard to let go of control. What do you see and how this is happening? This sort of struggle between the creator and next gen.
Oh, yeah, very much so. It's one of the things we got to watch out for and caution against is ruling from the grave. That I put these provisions into my legacy plan, my trusts, my estate plan, that I want these things to happen. I'm still in control and I want these things to happen. And it creates an inflexible framework, almost an inflexible prison for future generations that they have to live with inside this controlled box because I just couldn't let it go. And so how do we release that and be flexible enough to allow our heirs to have their own identity and make their own journey, because that's what we had. We've made our own way, we've made our own journey. And so how do we pay that forward? And I think about on our deathbed, this comes from numerous palliative care end of life studies. The 5 things that matter most: was I loved? Did I love? Was I forgiven? Did I forgive? And did my time here matter? Hmm. That has nothing to do with dollar amounts, or you should go to this school, or you should do this thing. It's about love and relationships.
Yeah, no, it's so powerful, especially the way you framed that, and such a wonderful thing to hear for that generation as well. Which is, I appreciate all those things, but what about me and who am I and where's my story? Uh, so when I think about how do we get there, right? How do we have those conversations? And obviously, we love our children. And we want that to happen, and yet things happen. We used to say, oh no, prepare for when you're going to get hit by a bus, and probably not going to be a bus anymore. Maybe it's a Waymo or something else. But you had to prepare for the unexpected. My father died unexpectedly at age 52 with an aneurysm, and we weren't prepared. So I went through this, personally, and it deeply affects the whole family unit, and which makes me very passionate about this very conversation. Ron, like, how do you coach your or clients or talk about this how do you let go, and is it possible to like sort of create intrinsic motivation to the heirs when they inherit wealth, or transition more to being a steward of wealth? How do you navigate that?
Well, I think let's take a step back for a minute. I think a lot of what you're asking really has to do with ego. I mean, remember, the pharaohs tried to bury themselves with money. That didn't really work out so great. So they're going to take it with them. I think that you have to instill in your kids, and again, there is no playbook, but I think you just have to instill in your kids, unconditional love, support. It's hard. You give your children wings. You give your children roots and you give them wings. The roots is sometimes easier. You're just giving them unconditional love. The wings is sometimes harder because they might be not be doing exactly what and they probably won't be doing exactly what you would do or what you would want to do. And I'm in, finance, and I've run a hedge fund, and I've got a daughter who's an artist. Now, I'm encouraging her to be an artist. It's totally opposite of what I understand, but I also understand she's not, she's got to live her own life. So I try as best I can to let them find what motivates them, what they're passionate about, and then I just encourage them. And I try to take my ego out of the equation. Um, that's what I try to do.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it comes down to awareness, right? And sort of, looking at the broader sort of, what are your what really is hopeful that happens so that when you do pass that, you have harmony within the family and that you can sort of connect to some sort of legacy and values translation. And you don't get caught up in the minutia, right, of the planning. So, just a couple more questions, and I do want to get to a great exercise that I know, Ron, I'm sorry, Doug, that you do that's very powerful. But this trap of over engineering, right? And so estate planning as a defense mechanism versus design. So, technical planning can sometimes mask like the deeper emotional relational work because it's an easy go-to. And there's conflict in families, there's sort of hierarchy, who gets what, all these sort of things. And, what, members I've seen do is really focus on, okay, they've got everything wrapped up in so many different ways to Sunday. And yet we still haven't had a conversation. And so have you seen this become a defense mechanism and then, what to do about it?
Oh, absolutely. Oftentimes our legacy planning is tax forward. And I always say, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. And it's in that desire to be tax efficient that we forget about for the sake of what? What do I hope all of this success that's been created does for my family?
Mhm.
And yet I've got it so locked down in efficient tax structures, which is great. That's great planning. But oftentimes there's unintended consequences. And so three things come to mind. If I'm so focused on me, my situation, and my tax situation, and I'm not thinking about for the sake of what, are there, first of all, I want to give just this amount to my kids because I want them to have grit. I want them to make their own way. I don't want them to be entitled. It's fear-based planning. Second thing is, but in order to save on taxes, I'm going to do a generation skipping trust and dump a ton of money on my grandkids. Well, okay, two things there. One, you just took away the choice that you're making for your own children from your kids for their kids. So think about that. And then the second thing is, if you don't think your kids are prepared and you want them to have grit, what makes you think your grandkids are going to be prepared? So watch out for those. And then forcing functions. Well, we'll get family harmony because we'll dump it all into a family foundation and everybody can come around the table and we can have fun and love giving money away. Okay, well, what if I support one cause and my sibling supports another cause that are diametrically opposed? How much harmony is going to be around that foundation table? So beware of forcing functions as well.
I love that. Let's do this. Let's bring the poll questions up or the results. We, we can see how people did in terms of, okay, so we have about 45% of founders, wealth creators, a little bit 8% next gen, a few spouses, about 30% advisors, family office, and just curious observers. I love that. And the most of what brought people today is they want to better prepare their heirs, which is excellent, right? And so it's finding out more information, which is fantastic. Let's see, what did people guess in terms of the transfer failed by the third generation? 44% guessed 70%. And of course, the answer, shockingly, by the third generation is 90%. 70% of wealth is lost by the second generation, which is just a shocking statistic to see, which is why we're here and having the conversation. Ron, what are your thoughts around that number? And is that part of the passion behind the work that you do?
Yes, like I said, there is no playbook. The issue is people have a liquidity event, and the amount of money you can make in the speed in which you can make it today is so different than it was. Rockefeller and Vanderbilt were probably the first family offices in, in the US, but it took generations to build that. These kids you can be 24 years old and create an app and create instant wealth. So the speed at which it happens is amazing. And then what happens is people have a liquidity event and there is no playbook. They start investing. Their friends see they sold their company for a lot of money. This guy's smart, so I'm going to invest in real estate with him. And this guy is smart, I'm going to invest in private equity. The first thing they should do before they make any investment is governance. Most people don't even know what governance is. Once they do governance, you kind of need a mission statement. Once you do that, you need to talk to an estate planning attorney. I mean, your estate planning attorney is more important than your financial guy because it's like the foundation of a house. And most people skip that. So we're so focused on building our business and we're head down. But at the end of the day, we don't have people tell us, well, if or when you sell your business, these are the things you need to do. I think one of the things Tiger does extraordinarily well is prepare people for that. Because if I'm a widget manufacturer and I'm focused on making as many widgets as profitably as I can, that's where I'm doing. But if I'm going to sell my company a year, 2 years out, I wasn't prepared to do discount valuations. I don't even know what a discount valuation is. I haven't talked to an estate planning attorney because I don't have an estate yet. But yet these are things that have to happen. So one of the things I think is interesting in what Tiger does an incredible job of is really prepare you for things that you're not ready for, and you don't even know you should be answering those questions. So that to me is really important.
I love that. And it's such an important point because, as people are, in their 40s or younger or whatever time frame, we bring up the word legacy and it trips a lot of my members up. They're like, oh, well, I don't need my name on a building, first of all, and I'm not ready. I have young kids or I haven't even started my family yet. And so, Doug, when is the right time? When is the right time to start these things?
Yesterday, as soon as possible. It's amazing to me how many of our members come to the table, or even prospective members, when I'm having the conversation. One of the funniest stories, a very well-known, very successful entrepreneur in our community. I'm sitting at his desk and sharing about Tiger 21. And I said, we do this thing called the portfolio defense. And he said, portfolio defense, what's that? And I said, it's where we learn about you, how you grew up, who your mentors are, your timeline, how this wealth was created, how you got here today, and then what are you doing with it? You'll show us your balance sheet, your income statement, your asset allocation, and your estate flow diagram, and you'll ask your personal board of directors, based on what you know about me, how am I doing? And he just blanched white and his eyes got really big and he said, people do that? And I said, yeah, absolutely. You communicate about your wealth. And best practice is to invite your spouse and your adult children so they can see it. Doug, the only two people who know my true net worth are my accountant and my attorney, and they're two different numbers. And I just remember that it's fear-based, and I don't want to burden my family with all of this detail and everything that I carry on my shoulders. And yet, Michele, and I'm so sorry that this happened to you, as you experienced, your father dies at 52, and all of a sudden, all of this is dropped into the lap of your heirs, and they are totally unprepared. And it's mind-boggling to me why we aren't talking about this and communicating this out.
Yes, no, it's beautifully said. Yeah, which is, the conversation and the communication early on to have even doesn't have to be a number per se, but it's like, what do we stand for and what's important to our family and who was my father? And, how do I keep a hold of that memory as I move on and share that with my children? So I think those stories are super important, right? And capturing that in a way, and before it's too late. And you just never know when it's going to be too late. Ron, how do you recommend, with that thread, of having these conversations and doing, all this sort of, preparation, if you will, how do you think, members should capture what they're wanting to do and their legacies and their wishes for it?
I think the easiest way is to model it, is to find families that that they get it right. I don't know what they did, but they get it right. and just kind of listen. We have two ears and one mouth, and most of us use this more than this. And I
Yes.
think if we get, I was a decent listener before. I think I'm good now. I'm getting better, but I'm working at it. But when people are talking, they're listening and then they're ready to answer the question before they're finished listening. So that's something we need to get better. And I think just by listening and truly understanding, and sometimes it's one or two words or a sentence at the very end that's really the most impactful. So I think that what I try to do is find who got it right. What
Mm,
did they do? Are
mm.
there common denominators for what they've done? And try to learn by that. I'm not going to try to create the playbook myself. I'm going to try to do it by people who are where I want to be. And that's what I try to do.
I love that. Well, and I think that's like the power of, having a peer network or, folks that are going through the same thing you are amongst all different stages and sharing different insights behind all of it. So one more question about sort of conflict, and then I want to move to one of the exercises that Doug focuses on. It's super impactful, but Ron, to stay on you for a minute, like, inevitably we have all the best intentions and, your siblings are fighting over, grandma's, ruby diamond ring or who got what percentage and who got control of the business and who's a part of the business, who's not a part of it. There's like 1,000 different things that could go wrong, no matter the level of wealth. Um, how do we help avoid conflict? And then when we have it, what do we do?
Again, it's a very difficult question without a specific answer. There's almost a direct correlation. It isn't direct, but sometimes the wealthier the family is, the more lawsuits, the more conflict that there is. And what's the point? I mean, you want to do well for various reasons. You want to be able to live your life and have freedom and have different kinds of things that you could do and give to your children and grandchildren. But at the end of the day, I think ego is really the one thing that gets in our way. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You need an ego to do well, to go out there and to do things maybe that you're a little unsure of at first. But I think the ego is a double-edged sword because it also is the biggest problem for many, many people. Just because I'm really good at something doesn't mean I'm good at everything. And it doesn't even mean I'm good at most things. And I think that we have to take the ego out of the equation. My belief is that over the next 20, 30 years, Brene Brown did an interesting study on vulnerability and talked about that. If you would have asked me when I was 25 years old to talk about vulnerability on a podcast, there would be a 0.0% chance I would even contemplate that. But what I've learned is, as I've gotten older, vulnerability is actually a strength. It's not a weakness. And we kind of go out. I've got a picture of the iceberg. So people see the 5%. They see you've got a nice house, you belong to a nice club, you've got a nice car, you take good vacations, etc. What they don't see is the 95% that's under there. Yeah, I do have that, but there were a lot of sleepless nights. There was a ton of stress. I almost didn't make payroll 5 different times. The amount of stress and I gained 30 pounds, all of these different things. That's really, it's the 95% that's under that people can't see. And that's really what we talk about. And when you go out in society, you have a mask and you're showing the 5%. But I think one of the things that Tiger does, which really I've learned to really acknowledge and appreciate, is we're all in this together. We've all got issues. We've all got problems. We've all got things. And rather than just talk about and show how wonderful and smart and wealthy and successful you are, how about flip it? And actually, it's cathartic to do.
I love that analogy. No, that's beautiful, the iceberg and vulnerability and leading with vulnerability. And what I've seen in my groups is that, once someone leads with that within the group, it begets more vulnerability. And the deeper you go, the more you share, the more you're connected, the more you learn from each other. And it's such a beautiful thing to see, because you're right. Like I've never seen one story in a portfolio defense that says, oh, it was up and to the right. There's a hockey stick. Yeah, I started out here, I invested this much, and now, we have a family office and, everything's great and everybody loves each other. No, it's very much a lot going on through that story and super impactful. Doug, and I do want to take a couple questions, that I'm getting in the chat, but I'd love to hear, I know you do something special within your groups, which is very powerful. And do you mind taking us through that a little bit, the eulogy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to double down on Ron's comments about ego and identity. And, I think about members who at the end of their life or have had a health event and visualize yourself laying on a bed of money and you cannot buy one more day of health. You cannot buy one more day of life. And so what does it matter? And no one's going to remember me as the founder of X or this. I'm dad, I'm husband, I'm brother. That's how I want to be remembered. And so to that point, whenever you want to get somewhere, you always want to begin with the end in mind. And so in Tiger 21, we do an exercise called the eulogy exercise as part of our legacy defense. And you actually write your eulogy. And let me be clear, it's not an obituary. An obituary is the facts about your life, where you grew up and what you did and all of the things, who you married and your kids. The eulogy is how you want to be remembered. If people are standing up talking about me, what do I hope they say about me? Was I helpful? Was I kind? Was I loving? Was I there? Was I present? What do I hope that people say? And am I living that life today? And it is such a powerful exercise. And it doesn't need to be morbid. Let's just accept the fact none of us are getting out of here alive. And so in that mindset, what do we hope people say about us? And we actually visualize it out. Members will write it, and then I'll have them lay out behind me, and I'll stand up and read it to our group. And it is such a powerful reminder of our mortality, and it gets beyond the ego, to Ron's point. And you hear such beautiful things, powerful words. And there's not a dry eye in the room. And then the question is that the life you're living today? And if not, how do you get there?
And remember what Doug said, there's not a dry eye in the room. These are uber successful entrepreneurs, type A personalities that when you see them on the street, that's the antithesis of what you think it is. And I think that one of the things Tiger does a great job of is just it allows you to be open and honest. And that's powerful.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it's so beautiful. I was, just going to pull up. I was thinking about the stats of Tiger. We've grown so much in the past few years. I mean, y'all have been with Tiger for, 8+ years or more, right?
Yeah, let me note though, Doug's won Tiger. Doug has won Share of the Year twice. I've won it 0 times. So let me just preface that for the audience.
Oh my gosh, now I'm going to blush. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
Michele, real quick, one other exercise we do that I would challenge everyone on the call listening to do. It's really about mindset. And I just want to triple down on Ron's point about the ego. And what is your mindset about your legacy? Is it fear-based or is it hopeful? And there's an exercise, take a blank sheet of paper and just write a line down the middle and put hopes on one side and fears on the other. And what do we hope the success that's been created does for our family? What are all the wonderful things we hope? What do we fear it'll do to our family? And write those out and get them out of your head and use that as a starting point for your conversation with your family. Just be honest. Here's what I hope this does. Here's what I'm afraid it will do. How can we work together to make sure that the hopes happen? And I'll say right now, I will personally pay for any of your estate planning if you can find an estate attorney that can paper a document that will ensure all your hopes happen and all your fears don't.
That's just beautiful. You guys, in terms of, gosh, I don't know, the heartfulness that you convey, which is why you've been doing this for so long, and the impact that you have, and the wide knowledge of bringing it all together is just really inspiring. I want to also kind of just bring a point to, where we've grown and who we are and why it's so impactful. But, Tiger's now 1,600 members, which is incredible growth globally. The total member assets are 190 billion or more than that at this point. Our age range goes from like 27 to 90, so all the way through. And our average net worth is up to 140 million. So we're talking about people with significant wealth, who are now thinking about the types of things that you're mentioning, and incorporating, into a family office. And obviously the definition of family office is evolving and changing as we go. If we could sort of leave off with, trends for the future, things to think about, a personal story you might want to share. Ron, do you have a tidbit for what's up and coming next for family offices and what they should be thinking about, or a personal moment that you think is relevant to share?
I'll do both. The personal moment, which is very personal to me, and actually Doug was there. It was the worst phone call I had ever received in my life. I was in Las Vegas, and my she's perfectly healthy, but she was misdiagnosed. And I got a phone call said she had pancreatic cancer. And I broke down, and I'm with Doug and a couple other Tiger members from the room. And you kind of go into fight or flight mode because, I'm fairly well connected in the business community, and if I want to get access to some private equity deals, I'm pretty good at that. I don't know, pancreatic specialist doctor. You don't know. So you go into a fight or flight mode. And what I did instinctively, which was interesting, and this is why to me Tiger has become so powerful. I've got two groups and now three with the family office group. I instinctively reached out. I just said, I need help. Here's what happened. Within 3 hours, I had almost everybody. Some of them called, just said, I'm praying for you. My thoughts are with you. I had several said, call this doctor, do this, do that. The amount of love and affection that happened. And my daughter, because of three of the members, was able to see a top doctor. Normally there'd be a 6-9 months wait. I waited 3 days. And that's the kind of thing that's powerful, that you don't really realize. So from the outside, people think it's a bunch of rich people talking about things. It's almost the antithesis of that, because now we get a chance to be vulnerable and to talk about things we'd want to talk about. So that to me has probably been the most impactful thing that's happened at Tiger. And when I describe what Tiger's like, I never talk about investment. I talk about that story.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm so grateful you shared that. And I'm grateful that she was able to get the help she needed in such a time frame. And what a powerful testament to network, right? And to people and to caring. And thank you for sharing that. How is everything now?
I believe she's in Africa. No, she travels the world. So she's doing great. She was in Sydney, Australia. She's a junior at Tulane. She's thriving, and she's a happy, healthy, beautiful, beautiful woman.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh my goodness. Doug, I mean, obviously, I know you also have beautiful stories to share, or a thought that you'd like to sort of leave us with, or something on your mind.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very hopeful for our future. With all the geopolitical and things that are going on, I look over time. So just quickly, we do an exercise in our family office group called Siglo. Siglo is century in Spanish. And I took them on a time travel. We went back to 1925 to 2025, and knowing everything that happens, the Great Depression, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, great financial crisis, all of the things that happened in the last 100 years. If you were running your family office, how would you anticipate all of that? And what changes would you make? But more importantly, what wouldn't change? What are the values? What are the foundations? What would you hope would stay in place and endure through all of that? And then we went forward 2025 to 2125 and said, okay, how do we build that change? Because we don't know what's coming. How do we build that foundational things that won't change into our plan? And how do we communicate that out to everyone? And I'm also very hopeful because it's the rise of women. In the next generation, this great wealth transfer is primarily going to go to women. Wow. I'm excited about that. Where's this going to take us in the world, financially, socially, community? So the rise of women. So very hopeful, very optimistic, and all boils down to communication, love, expectations.
Now, you guys have brought up so many relevant points, and hopefully we've touched on some points about the data that's out there that supports it, and then what we've experienced as well. You bring up, then next gen, and then what can we be doing? And so, yeah, living by example, of course, taking time to have the communications, engaging with putting the documents together, both on the estate planning side and on the value side. And then also listening to the heirs, right? Listening to your heirs. And what I would say is some more stats and kind of end on, don't disclude that. You talked about ego a lot, Ron, and it's kind of setting that aside, even though it's what made you successful. Now, what will make you successful in your next chapter is learning to, I think what they say is your first part of your life is building your ego. And then the second part of your life is learning to let it go and focusing on within. And so that's the real challenge. So I love that you guys have done that. And we've talked about that today.
There's a great book from Arthur Brooks called Strength to Strength, which I would highly recommend anybody and everybody to read. And it's really just about the second half of life. And it was just a wonderful book. And that's really the kind of stuff it talks about.
I love that. Yeah, so with one final, okay, I noted one final one, but we got a couple minutes. I'll wrap. Everyone is going to get this recording, by the way, that registered. They'll also get a one pager of some of the highlights of the data we shared and the points that were made. I'd also just like to point out that, if obviously you see Doug and Ron, they're incredible people, incredible humans, and they're willing to help, as am I, if anything I'd be helpful with. If there was anything that sparked an interest, please do follow up with us with Tiger 21, or, we can hit us up in LinkedIn and get our emails as well. But I just am so grateful. Speaking of gratitude, I'm grateful for both of you. I'm grateful for, my experience with Tiger. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with this. I feel inspired, engaged, and just thank you guys so much for all the wisdom that you bring forth today.